dire concern at the very start of this, back on the 7th, and in the week or so after, and aircraft carriers being moved in to the Middle East and airstrikes and things. We do, if you like, we don't seem to have reached the brink. It's almost as if we accept the fact that this conflict is now ongoing. It doesn't have the shock value, and I might have this wrong, I don't feel the tension and risk that there was a couple of weeks ago.
Well, it may be because where we are, but I can assure you in the Middle East, there is tension ratcheting up. If you take a country like Oman, the back page of the major newspaper there yesterday, and this is a close friend of the United States, depicted Mr. Biden as something of a war criminal, being complicit in the flagrant violation of international law and humanitarian law. So I think appearances can be deceptive in a crisis like this. I think from the point of view of the Middle Eastern countries, and I think much of the world, many people are outraged by the fact that the international community is essentially watching this from an armchair and unable to do anything. Mr. Biden's getting increasingly frustrated because, for a number of reasons, that Mr. Netanyahu, who's happy to accept American support, but he doesn't always accept their advice. And he didn't. There's two things where there is tension building between the United States and Netanyahu. First of all, Mr. Biden gave very clear advice that he did not want the storming of the Al-Shifa major hospital in Gaza. And secondly, he's made it quite clear and reaffirmed that he does not want a reoccupation of Gaza because he believes that would be a strategic mistake. Again, there's the Israelis under Mr. Netanyahu listened to the advice, but they have gone ahead. They have launched a military operation in Al-Shifa and some shocking scenes there. And
nowhere near as shocking. Look, but I mean, we've got to be careful here. I saw a TVNZ story yesterday that said the hospital had been destroyed. The picture they showed associated with the headline wasn't even of Al-Shifa Hospital. And I'm also seeing real-time footage coming out from the IDF showing weapon caches inside that hospital.
Yes, again, but you mentioned that both sides are trying to build a narrative here, or you implied that. Yeah. And truth is often a casualty of war.
I tend to believe, if I was going for credibility, Robert, I tend to believe the national army of a recognised state rather than a group who have just beheaded babies, put them in ovens, flown over a border in microlights and slaughtered innocent kids at a rock concert.
Well, again, I mean, yeah, look, Israel, how should I put it, has acted in a fashion which is inconsistent with international law and humanitarian law.
Has anyone actually taken a case against them? Are they facing charges?
No, they're not in the International Criminal Court. And I think there's going to be conflicting versions of what happened. What we do know is that the attempt to get... You see, the problem is, I think, one of the fundamental problems is that you can fully understand Israel's attempt to bring Hamas to account. I don't think anybody has any problems with that.
Yeah.
But it's the way in which it's being done. Lots of people who had absolutely nothing to do with the terrorist attack have had their lives turned upside down and lost family members. More than 11,500 Palestinians are dead.
Yeah.
And they hate Hamas. I mean, all the indications are that most Palestinians detest Hamas, but they're saddled with them. They're embedded there. They are a terror group. Their leaders are living in luxury, many of them, in the Gulf states. They do not care about the lives of ordinary Palestinians. The question here is, how do you deal with Hamas? Well, the problem is that the Israelis are persisting with the fiction, the fantasy, I would say, that you can militarily eradicate them. Yes, you can destroy Hamas, but it comes at enormous cost. And secondly, you will be radicalizing people in the process, because think of all those families who've lost members, their children, 5,000 children dead, just think how the surviving
Where do
family
we get
members
that figure
of those
from,
people.
Robert? Where does that figure come from?
Well, from the UN and from also the international non-government organisation active on the ground.
Yeah.
Human rights organisations, for example. So I think these figures are pretty credible. And you only have to look at Gaza. Look at the aerial photographs. It's been 60% of it. More than 60% of it has been affected by the bombing.
Okay, so if a military intervention has currently been conducted by Israel isn't the answer, what is?
Well, I think the Palestinians, after 5 decades, have to be given a clear pathway to a viable state. And it goes back to our first discussion on this issue. There has to be a diplomatic solution to what is a political problem. Let's just say, for example, and of course, there's no doubt that Israel is going to be successful. This is the supermarket versus the corner shop in military terms.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that Israel's going to prevail. But the problem is, when it's all over, when the fighting's over,
the problem's still there.
The remnants of how the Hamas fighters are gone. Your question is, what next?
Yeah.
And that's precisely the question that's not being fully addressed. Yeah. Is Mr. Netanyahu laying out a plan for guaranteeing Israel's security, but recognizing the factor which has been imperiling Israel's security, which is the Palestinian desire for political self-determination and possibly statehood? I mean, this is something that's got to be addressed.
Yeah. Do you think what the Mayor of Christchurch or the Mayor of Wellington thinks about this makes a blind bit of difference as to what that outcome is going to be? Do you think the international community waits with bated breath for a virtue signal or a position to be taken by a local body in New Zealand?
Well, unfortunately, our leadership of this country has been paralysed to some degree. We've had this political transition in which an outgoing government is waiting for a new government to take place. And as we all know, that's been a protracted process. In my view, Chris Hipkins and Chris Luxon should have got together about the 8th of October or the 9th of October, immediately after the appalling attack, issued a joint statement. Yes, of course, New Zealand has made statements, and actually most of the New Zealand statements, in my view, are extremely sensible and balanced. But the problem is we haven't had a clear sense of direction where New Zealand stands on this. The New Zealand position has not always been articulated as loudly and as repeatedly as it should be, because the world is watching us. Believe it or not, the world notices us when we do good things and when we are silent.
Yeah. What did you think of the then Foreign Minister, Nanaia Mahuta, essentially countermanding the advice she got on the first statement she made regarding this from Foreign Affairs and rewriting it?
I think in retrospect, Nanaia Mahuta, who was widely criticised for not being supportive enough of what's called Israel's unreserved right of self-defence, she said that Israel had a complete right of self-defence, but that self-defence must be conducted within the framework of a humanitarian law. That is to say, the right of self-defence is not limitless.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely the case. And that, in retrospect, has stood up well.
Yeah.
Because, unfortunately, there were war crimes committed by Hamas in the first place, and there's certainly war crimes being committed since.
The fact is there could be a ceasefire tomorrow, couldn't they, if all the hostages were released?
Yes, possibly that could happen. And that would be a great step forward.